bonjour, hola, guten tag, namaste, ciao, привет, konnichiwa, annyeonghaseyo, marhaba, adab, ni hao, shalom, and salam. Greetings. Didn't it feel like we are in an airplane that's taking us around the world to different countries? Thank you for attending our monthly Chai and Chats. This is our 8th month session. We hold these community Chai and Chats at no cost with important topics that community thinks it's important. And we talk about some of the topics that's sensitive, that we don't usually talk about in public, but this gives an opportunity with experts to discuss it further and come towards solutions. I would like to thank our intern. She just joined us newly, Neelam Kaushik. Thank you, Neelam, for joining us as an intern. So we wish you all the best in completing your master's. We thank Rashita Iyer today for volunteering, and Hari Bukia, where you there for helping us today as well. Quick housekeeping, snacks and teas available throughout, so feel free to grab anytime, with the snacks being from biryani pot, there's pakora, and their signature dish, which is the peppercorn. So feel free to enjoy. We will have our agenda is the panel discussion first, and then we have a break. We have closing comments from Soon Mi and Kim Schooler, brief comments, and then we'll go for a break, and then we'll have the half-an-hour musical, intercultural music coming together. So you're going to really enjoy that because the kids are going to sort of play their talents, and how music has no culture or words, but it just brings all of us as one world. Our topic today is cultural identity. And thinking about cultural identity, it's not a debate, right? But it's something that we have to understand and respect of each other. And unless we understand, that's when we learn to respect. When we are sitting and standing with misconceptions and stereotyping and implicit bias from ourselves, how is it that we are going to understand the others more? So some of that is going to be talked about today, and our experts are going to help us learn more and what are the solutions that we can have. As I'm going to come to my seat, for the panelists, I have just quick updates. If you can speak on the lapel here, right? So, so Jay, we have one from this side. I know we just have 3 mics, so if you can share as you're finishing up from your side. And then you don't have to look at me every time to answer. You can look at the audience. So here you go, Joe. And you have to speak on the small lapel mic. And one for Santiago, and if you can share from among yourselves. Okay. So Jay, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
What is the best thing about living in USA? And I thought I'll stop there, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to also ask, what is the worst thing about living in USA? And that's the question in general for all our panelists today.
The best thing, I think this is a country for opportunity. And I think for many of us, being a first-generation immigrant, that's the reason that we came here. The worst thing, I think it has not happened yet. And I think that, and I hope it never will, it's a constant challenge at every stage of our lives. And I've been to the United States for the last 33 years, coming up 33 years. And there are some challenges along the way, but this is what I believe. I love some leadership book. So one of the best things that I've read about was you overcome to become an overcomer. So I'd like to take that and encourage everyone. This is just something, challenge is just something that, and another opportunity to grow.
Very nice. Jay, let me quickly introduce, even though your profiles are running in the background, Jay Lin is our Johns Creek City Council man, and Dr. Uma Majumdar is representing sort of the Indian culture, but also wears several hats and is an adjunct professor at Spelman College. Dr. Alan Carter is a psychologist, but also one of the very intense philosopher that I know, from the very few I know, but he also runs a show on AIB called Who Am I, which is just fitting for today's topic, right? And Milena is a good friend, wears different cultural hats, but basically sort of representing the community aspect of what does it mean to be multicultural. And Mr. Javier, no Mr. Javier is from the General Council of Mexico. So thank you for being here. And I believe someone here asked me, started speaking to me in Mexican. In Spanish. I said, sí, no, sí, Indian. But I would love to learn Spanish. Yes, so that's my next thing. Nadia is from Consul General of Canada. So thank you for being here. Appreciate your presence here. And for those, Yusuf wears several hats, one of which is Women's Right Community Advocate and also a founder of Al-Noor Domestic Violence Prevention Service. Joe Bankoff, you come with a lot of experience on different cultures, and now you are the Dean of the Georgia Tech International Affairs School, and also you are the chair of the Fulton County Arts and Council Department, so thank you. And of course, our Japanese Council, thank you for being here. You are here with your twins today, so thank you for bringing them over. And Santiago, you are the CEO of the Georgia Hispanic Chamber Coalition. And I have interesting questions for you, but you have to wait for a second.
No problem.
Very nice. Go ahead. And Dr. Umar, you are next. If you can speak on to the sort of the lapel, if you can hold the mic on to the lapel. Yes.
Never used it. Okay.
So what is the best part of living in US? And probably I wouldn't say what is the worst part, but what is some of the, or the bad, maybe not so good part of living in US?
Okay. When you have lived here for 4+ decades, there are so many highlights of living in Atlanta. Not only United States, but having lived here for almost 42 years, probably some of you may not be even 42, but anyway, so we have seen Atlanta growing by leaps and bounds, some for good, some for not so good. For example, let me first take for not so good, traffic. Traffic is horrendous.
And none of us thought about that.
And for example, I thought I'll be making it here in 20 minutes today. But Saturday, it took me 35 minutes. So we all face that. But that's very obvious. To me, the biggest joy, which continues even after having lived here for so long, is the community. The southern community, Atlanta, which was meant to be a small town, is now growing by leaps and bounds. But still, there is such warmth and closeness. You go to a grocery store and you are greeted, by everyone with a smile. They don't care where you come from and what is your accent, but they are so mixing and warm people. So warmth of the community, that's number one. And of course, for me and my family, my husband, intercultural exposure. That is the biggest plus point of living in the United States, I would say. Some people say, well, your husband is doctor, you are so well educated, you could have gone to Dubai or somewhere and make money like crazy. I say, well, yes, but nowhere else but in this country. So far, so good. So far, we have not only been thriving personally, but I think the biggest plus point, as I said, is to be able to mix with people of different nationalities,
Right.
languages.
Sure.
And some people say it's a disadvantage. I mean, how do you raise children here? Now my children have grown up and they have their own children.
Sure.
But in the beginning, like any young mother, I had worried about it.
Sure.
But then we look at the positive side, that it's not an Indian-American community. It is an enriched Indian experience.
Very
Because
nice.
you have two pairs of eyes, you have two languages, your own and English, two cultures. So you have just like multiple things, multiple flavors of ice cream. You have so many different things to choose from.
Right.
And it depends on parents how to raise your children, make good choices in life. So I think every Indian, not only Indian, any immigrant community is at an advantage of having come together. See Gandhi's life.
Sure.
Gandhi went to London, and that's only how he began to experience his own culture, his own religion even.
Dr. Uma, so I'm going to gather you mostly are having the positive aspects of living in US, which I appreciate. And we're going to discuss deep into some of the points that you're talking about. Dr. Carter, what about you? What's the best about living in US? And might be not so good about living in US.
Well, I'm alive. I'm originally from Alabama and went to Morehouse back in the early 60s. I got arrested here in Atlanta. Atlanta then was just black and white, okay? I got arrested because I wanted a hamburger at Richie's, okay? And there's no more Richie's. But anyway, Atlanta, the reason why I guess I think the best thing about living in the U.S., I was born in Fayetteville, Tennessee, and grew up in Alabama, and been here in Atlanta for over 40 years. But I guess the best thing about living in the U.S. is the ideals of that Constitution. I'm not a lawyer, Jim is, and there might be other lawyers here, but the ideal that this country was founded on, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that it is up to me. I am responsible for the government. The government is not responsible for me. I am responsible. And so that means I have to find out who I am. And that's why I like, this topic today, because being here in America, I can now really get into the most important question I think there is, and that is, who am I? What is my identity?
Very nice, thank you. Milena, what about you? I know you're a newbie, so if you can speak on to the lapel, the small lapel. Yes.
Well, I think maybe the biggest advantage in US is that it's a very flexible country. If you're an entrepreneur, you can basically do whatever you want here as long as you are not breaking the law, and people won't look here where you're coming from. There are many countries that won't allow you to do that, and they are very strict in that particular aspect. Germany's country are very different. And negative, I feel sometimes people are too superficial here. They should look more into the deepness of everyone.
That's intense. Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Javier?
Thank you. I've lived in the United States for over 15 years. This is my fifth diplomatic posting in the United States. And I began by saying that because I think I have the opportunity of living in different Americas. Part of my life I was in California, New York, which are like two different countries. And of course here in the Southeast. And I think, one of the greatest things about this country is that we're able to have such diversity like we have in this room right now. People who come from all over the world because they come here to find a better life. And most people actually, are successful doing that. So that is the great thing that I've had in the past 15 years, being able to learn so much about people from all over the world, and of course learn a lot about the different cultures within the United States, which is also, not a monolithic culture. And pretty much in the same vein, I would say probably from my perspective, the not so positive side is that a lot of immigrants struggle very much in the United States to find themselves, to find a place. And we are particularly worried because they tend to isolate themselves. They tend to be afraid of the mainstream. They tend to be afraid of people who don't look like them. And they isolate themselves in a certain part of a town, of a city, and they don't get out from there. And they are fearful. They are particularly anxious right now, and they are victims of people who take advantage of them. So that is, a great concern right now for people who come from my country into the United States. They have done great being here, but right now they are living in very difficult times.
Thank you. Very well said, and truly so. Nadia, you are just our neighbor. I don't know if there's any difference, but
Well, and I've only been here in the United States for 7 months now. I arrived in September of last year. So, I definitely don't know enough to have any negative views yet. I think for me, it's really been all positive. One thing that stands out for me, having never lived in the United States before, is indeed the similarities between the United States and Canada. But even more particular than that, the similarities between the Southeast United States and my hometown and home province. I was born and raised in Ottawa, Ontario, which is known as a small, big town. And I just feel coming to the Southeast that the warmth and the welcoming nature of everybody since I have arrived has been tremendous. And, I say to people that I feel like Atlanta and the Southeast USA really has all the warmth of a small town with all the benefits of a big city. And so yeah, I'm very, very pleased to be here. Have no negatives yet. I mean, I don't enjoy the traffic, I will admit, but that's about it.
have you tried the soul food yet?
I have not, but I have had lots of invitations to do so. So
Okay, good.
I'm hoping
That
over the
should be
next
on your
couple of
list.
months.
Okay, sounds
Indeed,
good.
indeed.
For those, how about you?
I have been here for 33 years, and the positive thing is there is check and balances, which I come from I came from part of Africa and part of Middle East, which is the opposite of America. And your rights here, there is rights. As a person, you have a right to do a lot of things with the limits, and as long as you are obeying the law. And that is, for me, is really a big difference. The negative, I don't want to say negative, but, issues that we face as an immigrant, people not understanding your values, what is good for you and they're not good for them, and also you're labeled for everything that is going on. That is really affecting most of the immigrants and the Muslim communities. So that is the negative thing that is happening. I don't want that to generalize it, all American people, but a few of them is not understanding or less education or less knowing the world. That makes them think all immigrant is labeled with different names. That is what the big challenge that is going on right now.
Thank you. Joe, this is your country. This is our country.
Well, it is. The best part of my view is the diversity that's here. I'm reading Alexander Hamilton, the history of this particular immigrant who came as a bastard child from the islands and became the first of the Secretary of the Treasury, really designed the entire commercial enterprise for the United States. And what strikes me is I'm a 2-generation removed from Belarus. I am 3 generations removed from Scotland, England, and Germany. We are all immigrants, with the exception of those that were born here as Native Americans. They resent being called Indians because that was Columbus's mistake. They have nothing to do with India. But the reality is there's a downside. And the downside is after you've had 3 generations here, you tend to forget that you are all a nation of immigrants. And it is, in fact, the strength that comes out of the diversity that is here that gives us unique opportunities. I chair a School of International Affairs at the moment, having practiced law and run the Arts Center in Atlanta for a while. And so I've been dealing with culture in lots of different flavors. But I must tell you that the immigrant population that comes here, particularly at times of stress, have three characteristics. Generally, they're smarter than the average bear because they know they need to move to someplace else. They're willing to take the risk to do that. And they believe firmly that if they work really hard, they and their children can get ahead. Those three ingredients literally are the glue that has held and built this country to where it is. We are less than 300 years old. And the cultures that come here are thousands of years old. And so respecting the differences in the culture is part of our strength and not something for us to be afraid of. And reminding ourselves of that is the problem I see.
Thank you.
Yes. Differently from my friend Javier, this is my first assignment in the United States, but I think that I have spent the 2 best years of my career.
Okay.
And I think that as most of my fellow Japanese citizens, the image of the United States, at least of the Southeast United States, is very positive. For us in general, in Japan, we consider that the United States is great because the United States is good, and this is what I was able to witness arriving here. This is a place which has not only a warm weather, but a warm heart, and where its diversity is incredible. It's an incredible, hospitable and friendly and inclusive place. So I think that the best thing to do here is to take advantage of all that. And the worst thing, if I'm not doing that, is not taking advantage of that.
It's the worst thing.
And the worst thing I'm actually doing is driving on I-75/85 or I-285
There you
in
go.
late afternoon. Thank you.
There you go. So thank you. And you have both your twins here, Maggie and what's the other one's name?
Yes, Lisa and Maggie.
Rita and Maggie. Thank you for coming today to enjoy the conversation, Rita and Maggie. So Santiago, we saved the best for the last.
Well, thank you. This panel is incredible. I'm just sitting here watching, enjoying this panel, and thank you for letting me be here. It's an honor. I came to this country from Cuba when I was a year old, and so for me, number one is freedom, right? You know, just being free to practice my religion, being free to go to work, not having to worry about a government who is watching your every move and has captains on every corner. And so, and I think the other thing is the big idea that really built this country. That notion, I know that was already said on the panel, that you can come with nothing, and certainly our family did, and you can have a better life, and you want your kids to have a better life. I think the challenges are really the lack of having an international understanding, right? The lack of having that understanding of the global world that's around you, you know. And I think that even in our schools, my kids go to an IB school, and we did that intentionally because we wanted them to get that perspective, that global perspective. But we pay a premium for that, and we shouldn't have to. And I think that's a challenge that we have with our kids and with our school system.
Thank you so much. Jay, the question for you is if you can pass the... So sometimes not just understanding the culture, but not even accepting the culture also leads to misperceptions and misunderstandings. So what are the ways that we can improve that? But also, how has culture been taught to you? If you can be specific.
Sure. So I think some of you might be able to relate to my personal experience. So when I first came to the United States, it took me nearly 2 years to feel somewhat that I left home. You know, I always try to, I had a very very little social network at the time. And my whole goal is just this is the place where I can be all I can be as successful as I can be, and then one day I might go home. You know, I'm sure still a lot of people, first-generation immigrant, will have that thought. But as time went on, I gradually accepted enjoy the privilege and also the responsibility of being a citizen. And it took me 8 years after I was qualified to go through this citizens process. It took me additional 8 years to say, this is something that I really want to do. And that really reflects to how we raise two of my children that I'm very proud of. I raised them as American first, not as, and maybe if they so choose to embrace, to enrich their lives with Chinese culture, then that's their choice. But I raised them as American first, so they will never be put on any kind of pressure to learn this language and that. The consequences of that is now they kind of regret, you know, they don't really speak as well of English, I'm sorry, as well of Chinese that as some of their friends that actually went to Chinese school, language school. So circle back to that question, I think personally, I think I will emphasize more on identifying, if we all have made the decision to be here and identify this is home, what does a home look like to us? The home should be some place that we feel safe. The home should be some place that we feel like we have the freedom to do things within the guideline of the community. And the home should be people that we can call friends and families, that we interact with each other without some of the perceptions that we might have experienced. So I got to tell you, I have ADD. So as I rumble, sometimes I forgot what you asked.
There, the doctor speaks.
So yeah, you know, I always joke with my friends. If I told my parents if I had early diagnosed of me having ADD, I could have been somebody.
Dr. Uma, thank you, Jay. So each of us, either as groups or individuals, identify ourselves differently through identity or culture. Might be the place we live, sometimes even with the political party we belong to, or sometimes with the club or membership that we have, right? But let's see the similarities. So in Latino, it's called machismo. In India, it's called mardanagi. So how do you, and it's almost means the same, right? Having the male figure as a prominent figure in any families. How do we continue with those values to acculturate to the US society?
It's not a simple question. It has so many different sides. What is culture? What are the cultural norms, values? What did you grow up with? And what do you face when you move outside that comfort zone of your own culture? Well, to talk about the culture in one place versus another, the place where you originally come from, you receive automatically as if from the cosmos, from the cultural cosmos, the values of respecting, for example, elders, respecting your own values, like not only worshipping, they say mother and father are like God, so obey, worship, etc. in India, when we were growing up in a joint family, then for you to express yourself, of course, was allowed. But when your older person says something, you have to, even if you disagree, you have to be quiet. You have to be, very polite and do what you want, but do not argue. When you move outside and you start raising your own children here, you have to now turn the tables. You have to be a good listener. You have to allow them the freedom to talk, to argue, and that shows you which one is right, which one is wrong. I think we both, my husband and I, feel that whatever helps your children think independently, grow independently, that is, and what is going to be, as you said, that first adopt this culture, American culture, because they have to work here, they have to live here, they have to go to schools here, they have to speak the language here. So I'm not diminishing the value of your own mother tongue. We also teach our children your own language. But when gradually, your native language, that is my native language, fades away, I understand that they are more accustomed now to American ways of dressing, American way of speaking, American because they are now Americans. So this is the discretion you develop over time.
Sure.
And you allow them to be not only Indian, not only American, but a citizen of the world. They have to fit into the culture which is here without losing the sight of your own values and your own culture. And that's a very tightrope dance. And every parent, I think, learns to, nobody came with it, but you learn to handle, and as you do the job, you learn on the job.
Very nicely said. Thank you. So, Dr. Carter, if you can get the mic from Dr. Uma. So, 2 years ago, I was doing this presentation, and for my presentation, I needed a brief research. So I started calling people randomly and asked, "Who are you?" Right? Suppose I called 20 people. Most of them sort of said, "Well, I'm a physician, I'm a doctor, I'm an Indian, or I'm an American." And so I heard different answers each time. And then I was not getting the answer that I was looking for, Nadia. So I had my 7-year-old then in the car, in the back seat, and I asked, "Rasi, who are you?" Her name is Rasi. She said, "Mom, I'm a human." And so I said, it took a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old to tell me the answer that I was looking for. So I guess as we grow up, we get tainted with all the other stuff and forget the core part. So the question I have for you, you've been dealing with a lot of who am I questions. And you talk about it as peeling the onion backwards to get to the truth, because you say the truth is unmovable and unchangeable. So what is the basis of foundation of who am I, or individuals, or culture? And here we are trying to fit into any of the cultures, or our own culture, within cultures.
I like that question. All the wise ones, the sages, the Jesus, Buddha, Lao Tzu, different cultures, different times, they all ask the same question.
And you can talk to them.
What is the basis of truth? Okay, and how do I relate to that? Okay, they ask it from their various cultural backgrounds, but they had to come to one central answer, and one thing which no one can deny, and that is, I am that I am. Now, what tells me what I am? Well, my parents would tell me something. As you said, the osmosis and my culture would tell me something. I need to take that into consideration. And whatever my culture or osmosis or environment tells me, it comes from the mind. Well, now it's a group of minds called a society, or well, now, whatever, because nobody grows up alone. So I have to realize that limits me. And I don't want to be limited by anybody or anything. Matter of fact, that's what any wise person knows, that whatever limits you will confine you. So you take whatever that limits you, your culture, your personality, or whatever, You take that into consideration, and you keep going forward until you can't go anymore. And that's what all the wise ones found out, that Jesus is, who was Jewish, the Buddha, who was Indian, okay? Lao Tzu, who I think was Chinese, wasn't he? But anyway, all various different men from various different cultures. But they came to the same conclusion. Now, why can't I? Why can't you? And the answer is, I am. That's it. That's who I am.
Very nice, thank you. So you always leave us in a thoughtful state, and I just blanked out on my next question. I'm just kidding. So, Milena, when we meet someone, we ask them several questions, and I think as I look at someone, as we speak internally, it just comes out the similarities and differences. Oh, she speaks my language. Oh, she dresses up like me, or she's not like me, and so we sort of built that up. And is that good enough for improving communications, or should we open up ourselves to understand more of the other person and leave the differences behind, but also understand and respect those differences? But with that said, has these stereotyping or prejudices that people put on you, has it affected any personal relationships or even your social relationships because of this stereotyping?
Yes, I think it does. And after living so many years in different foreign countries, I'm originally from Venezuela, spent a lot of time in Germany, went to India, have been in Japan, and now I'm here. I think it does makes you change, and it makes you more aware of the things that are not really nice from your own culture, and you don't want to be identified as such. And it makes you change that kind of behavior you might have. I want to put as an example an experience that I had in Germany. I was teaching a group of kids. I was belonging to an association, helping to raise the kids bilingual. And when I came to that association, they were having a lot of problems. The directive group of them, and there were a lot of fights, and Latinos are well known for trying to get the best of everything, and being a very, I must say, very, it was quite corrupt, so to say. And when I went there, and I said, okay, I don't like this, I don't like this, and I don't like this. And then a German lawyer said to me, I realize in this group there are many people trying to, use their power to change things here, but nothing is really happening. There is nothing substantial in it. So what's the best way to fight against that? I thought is just show your work, show who you are. And after some times, he told me, wow, I'm very impressed. The only thing that you have in common with the Latins is that you also speak Spanish. And it's sad, but I realize, I know it's true, but we can also change it, the way people look at us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Milena. So Javier, each one of us, every one of us has a cultural identity, right? Either it's from our, it doesn't always have to be our birth heritage. It can be the current family we raise, or has nothing to do with our birth heritage, right? But to agree that we do have our own likes and dislikes, right? So how have you identified yourself culturally? And what do you think are the challenges faced by the Latino community in the US? And what are the things that we can do to improve the stereotyping? Recently, I was in a place where publicly a few of the people were speaking, and I heard a sentence called, oh, he was a Mexican in our house. I respect everyone, I respect their talents, but just to direct and say they are only fit to do certain types of jobs, I guess is not right. So how do you improve that But apart from that, how do you identify yourself also culturally?
Yeah, the last question you made is like the $64 million question, of course. I mean, in terms of how do I identify myself? Well, I'm a Mexico City born and raised, so basically, I'm a typical, what we would call in Mexico, I'm a typical Chilango, which is basically a Mexico City person, which makes me very different from a Mexican in the South, from the jungles of Chiapas, or from a Mexican from Veracruz in the Gulf of Mexico, or someone who's from the North in Sonora. Pretty much like the United States, there are several Mexicos, several cultures. I'm a city guy because I was born and raised in Mexico City. But of course, now I think I'm a very different person because of my work and because of my profession. I've lived many, many years outside of my country. And that has changed me. And that has, when I go back to Mexico, and of course, I'm very happy and I engage with my family and my friends, of course, there is a different, they have evolved in a different way than I have, in certain ways. I'm still very proud of who I am. I'm still very proud of where I come from, and I will be till the day I die. But, people evolve, and cultures evolve. And that's very important to understand, and that's one of the things that we work constantly with our Mexican community, for example, here in the United States, to try to support them and help them, because they are facing this basic issue that has been discussed here for them. Many of them seem to be finding themselves in a conflict, in an internal conflict, because of course we do think and we do tell them that they live here, they have American children, and they are probably going to be here for a long time. So they need to understand, they need to learn English, they need to understand how this country works and assimilate and be a fully functioning part of the community here in the United States. To them, to many of them, not all of them, but to many of them, that is difficult because they might think that means leaving Mexico behind. That means, leaving their culture or their ancestry behind. And what we tell them is, no, it's not a choice. It's not a zero-sum equation. You can be both things. You can be very proud of who you are. You can be very proud Mexican from Chiapas or from Guanajuato or from Monterrey. You can be very proud of your music, of your culture, of your religion, and wear it on the sleeve. But at the same time, you need to understand that you are American. And you can be Mexican-American, and you are both things. It's not a choice. So that is a very important thing. It's easily said, of course, but that is a very important thing that we need to stress every time, especially because a lot of the immigrant community is facing this, this internal conflict.
Thank you. So Nadia, before we come to your question, as Javier started speaking, it reminded me of my time at UNC Chapel Hill and coming in new from India. So whenever I used to have African Americans or anyone passing by, I would just clench to my purse, right? And then I realized I wasn't comfortable even around the Mexican or Spanish men or African American men, and this was me coming from India. And once when I was coming from Chapel Hill to Atlanta, along with friends, our car broke down at 3 a.m. on 285, or in those spots. A car stopped behind us, and 3 Spanish men got out, and all of us locked the door, right? And we've already called the AAA. They said 45 minutes. So they knocked the window and they said, we can help, see, and in Spanish. And then somehow the gut inside me said, it's okay. And we opened the trunk. And in 15 minutes, they changed our tire to the other tire that you usually put. And we were on our way. I've never felt as guilty in my life as ever. So I think, like what you said, sometimes in teaching, it's not as effective as an experience. Mm-hmm. So when I went back after that trip to Atlanta, to Chapel Hill, the first thing I did was get on to the multicultural class. So I learned more about Asian American, I learned more about African American, I learned more about Latino Americans and Hispanics and the history. And that's when my guilt went off. That's when the fear went off. I never clenched onto my purse anymore. So it was all the media that was giving me the information, and I didn't have real friends, but after learning further and further through that class and getting to know real people, opened up. So I think that's one of the solution, and not just to experience other cultures in real time, and also that awakening. So far, that's when the respect immensely increased. So that's my story on why I want to do this for others as well, and why they should respect other cultures as well. So Nadia, from history back then, there has always been clashes among racial or cultural to show who is racially superior, right? So how much does colonialism, history, economic development, the political stature, and all that, does it have an effect on how much we perceive a culture to be as, or could it be different? Because if that's how it is, if we don't know history, then we don't know the culture. It's just what we hear say and what we learn from our parents. But there might be so much more history that we don't know. So where do we really put the culture and trust the culture? This is the truth and this is the history.
That's a
Or
good
my next,
question.
or the other, in other
I
way,
mean-
where does this racial superiority come from?
Well, that I don't know. But what I can say is, you know, and further to what you were saying when you were telling your story about your lived experience, is that when you talk about history and his story and how his story is told over the years, you come to realize that it is he or she who tells the story who gets to frame the experience that one has. And so I think it's very telling and very powerful to hear you say and to acknowledge that some of the prejudices that you had as a younger person were very much shaped and influenced by the media and by the story and the history that you might have been told or consumed along the way. And so, you know, I do think that it's important to be very mindful and very procedural, surgical in telling each other's stories from different perspectives. Because I do think that one person's or one culture's story is not monolithic, right? So I am Canadian, I am also Black, I am also a woman. All of those intersections help to shape my story and the story that I will leave for my children and my children's children. And, you know, I will say that in Canada, what we've really tried to do, and I by no way say that we have done it perfectly, but we, in fact, were the first country in 1971 to have an official policy of multiculturalism. And the idea behind that was similar to what others were saying previously, was this idea that, you know, we in Canada are a country of immigrants, and immigrants would come to Canada and feel this push and pull between where they were now, i.e. Canada, whatever province they were in, whatever city they were, and where they came from. And I think that at the time, the government of the time realized that one way, not the way or the best way or the only way, but one way to help people become comfortable as Canadians is to also allow them to be comfortable with bringing and keeping their culture from where they came from. Mm-hmm. And so we initiated in the 1970s this policy of multiculturalism, which is really about everybody being Canadian. So we don't use the term Black Canadian or Hispanic Canadian. We don't. It's not something that's normalized in Canada. Although more and more as we get introduced to American culture, people are kind of bringing that in. But historically, that's not. You know, we're Canadian. But if any of you have ever visited Canada or have ever, heard about Canada, we have communities from all over the world, rich. You will go anywhere and you will see rich diversity everywhere, people speaking all different languages. We celebrate all different cultures. We have festivals celebrating all different cultures. The government, the cabinet is reflective of that multiculturalism, and that was the idea. So I think that that's kind of part of history and making sure that the story is told in a pluralistic and multicultural way.
Thank you so much. So for those, sometimes the styles of communication and nonverbal gestures are part of our culture. So if I say this or I bet my Indian friends would know what I mean, but others are like, in my office, I had this lady, you just kept shaking your head. Does that mean you said no? I said, no, I completely agreed with you, but she said you kept shaking your head like this. I'm like, so it's better to laugh. I've never been laughed at. I've laughed with them. I'm like, I know I need to be conscious of what I'm doing, but that's just from where I come from. That's how we shake our heads. So with that said, there are several other methods that we follow from our own culture, even here. So is it hard to immensely acculturate into this culture, leaving those that belongs to us, those styles behind? Can you, or what do you think? Or should we sort of come to a common ground where we accept that we're in America now, you need to stop nodding your head?
Well, if you grow up nodding your head for 35, 40 years, it's very hard to not to do it. For example, the Arabs, they talk very loud, and when two Arabs are talking, you feel like they're fighting, but that is a norm. And here in America, when you raise your voice, especially at workplace, you will be called by HR. Because you're raising your voice on me. So it's really very hard to find the common ground on this situation because it is very hard, the habit of your culture or the way you grow up or you've been in that situation for so many years. For if you come in here in a younger age, that is easy. But when you come in here in older age, we just have to understand and accept it and educate the other people. This is a culture. It is not a real behavior.
Right. So basically you're saying that it's okay to get into the American culture, but also preserving our own culture is a...
You know what? There is a lot of culture that we want to preserve, our values. But there is certain things also we want to avoid. Whatever is the norm, it is not norm here. So saying that, for example, I came from the Middle East, from Yemen, the women's situation. I'm a women rights activist. And what was going on according to their law, to that culture, nothing has to do with the religion, but it is a culture. Certain things that about women's rights, and women is not allowed to go outside, women not allowed to work, woman is not allowed to go outside without her husband, and I don't agree with that. And we cannot bring that here. And you don't come here and tell your wife, stay home, and you cannot move without me. That is not acceptable. So there is certain things we can keep. There is a lot of things we have to leave it there.
Sure. Thank you. So, Joe, you are in a very good position because we are more than just talking about culture, and we just talked about cultural differences. Let's move to some of the solutions, right? So arts can be a medium or a forum for social change, right? Arts doesn't have, it might have some heritage or culture, but it sort of brings people together. How do you, from your position being the arts board chair for Fulton County, but also the international affairs chair, see arts and education to be one of those forums to promote change, acceptance of multiculturalism?
I think arts are a really important tool. There was a period of time when I ran the Woodruff Arts Center, And when I was the CEO, I was obviously very much interested in education in the art form. That is, helping students become better musicians or actors or visual artists. But my personal interest has always been the arts in education, not education in the arts. And it is for this very reason. There's a middle school near Chambly that has 12 languages that's being spoken. And the diversity of the children who have come as the children of immigrants or first generation or born American, but nevertheless raised in at least 2 languages. You put that group in a chamber group, all right? Or you put them in a jazz trio, or you put them, I don't care if they're in a rock group. You have an amazing thing begin to happen, and that is they're from different parts of culture, but they want to do something that they can only do together. In order for it to work, everybody has to do their part. It has nothing to do with grades or money. It has everything to do with, can we do this better tomorrow than we did yesterday? And that brings a kind of pride that is a life skill. It's not just about them getting better in whatever the art form is. In addition to which, it comes with parents and siblings and aunts and uncles. We seat about 110 young musicians in the Atlanta Symphony Youth Orchestra, which has been part of the orchestra for a very long time. It's a big competition to get into it. About 300 kids come try out for it. And I remember a couple of years ago, they did the Dvorak 9, From the New World. And it's a big symphonic piece. It's a very demanding piece. And I looked at that crowd on the stage, and then I looked at the parents and the aunts and the uncles in the audience, and that was extraordinarily diverse. It was from the New World. And so I've always thought that the arts are not only a way of celebrating the individual cultures. I've been honored to paint the dragon eyes on the new puppet. I have been honored to be at Cinco de Mayo. I have had lots of different kinds of opportunities. But the key here are the kids. Because somebody that's 40 years old is not going to change the way they think or the way they behave very radically. They'll adapt. These are smart people, and they can adapt, figure out how to make it work. But the future's in the children. So it is particularly important, not only because the parents want to preserve the language and the culture that they have for their children, but that the children become accustomed to the fact that there's more than one name for the word table. It can be a mesa, it can be lots of things. And at the end of the day, where the children become familiar with friends who are of different backgrounds, you have achieved what you were trying to do. And the arts are a very good pathway to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. So, Consul General Shinozuka, I've attended the Japan Fest. It was really intriguing looking at all the programs that you had. How much is the Japanese celebrations or traditions important to you? As much as important to you is it to your family? Do your kids learn your language? And what do you think are the factors that you're going to promote them to carry your culture to the future? Or do you say we're just going to be Americans and forget learning the language?
Well, first of all, I would like to make publicity to you all about the Japan Fest. Maybe you have heard of it, but this is a Japanese cultural festival which is held in Infinite Energy Center, not too far from here. And this year, it's on September 15th and 16th. So for us, for the Japanese community, promoting the Japanese culture in this way is important for 2 reasons. First, to have our culture better known by the American people. And I think that fortunately, the image is very positive. And secondly, as you told, to teach about our culture to the younger generations. So, and I am very happy to see that Japan Fest is not only is not the only opportunity occasion in which the Japanese culture is celebrated. I know that a very interesting event named MomoCon is just now held in Atlanta, and the Japanese pop culture, if not all of it, is is an important part of this event. So I can say that we have a traditional culture and also a pop culture, which are both appreciated, and that makes me happy.
Very nice, thank you. So Santiago, we use the word Hispanic and Latino sort of hand in hand. We really sometimes don't know the difference. But as a person, do you feel you're trapped in two worlds? Or also, how do you improve the media or the stereotyping of certain cultures in the media which depict and increase the misperceptions about that community?
Yes, so Latinx is now the new term that we're hearing. I had no idea what it meant, but luckily we have a group of millennials that is part of our chamber and educated me on it.
Right.
And it really takes out the Latino piece of being male-driven, as going back to that. But yes, we're the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and we've been that for 34 years. And so for us, it's a case of branding. We do have a board member that just came on from Coca-Cola who's Brazilian. And so we really should call ourselves the Georgia Latino Latinx Chamber of Commerce. But yes, in terms of the media, look, I think a couple of things. I think one thing is we need to do a better job in our own community in terms of education. Education of our kids, right? So we face a tremendous epidemic, in my opinion, in terms of dropout rates. If the data concerning our Latino youth were an illness in terms of graduation rates, this would be an epidemic. I mean, people would be freaking out. The Surgeon General would be on top of this. The whole country would be mobilized. And we have to take ownership of that. We have to do a better job of focusing on education in our community and getting our kids out of high school and getting them either to a traditional college or a technical school or something, but we've got to put more focus on education in our community. And then number two, we have to mobilize ourselves. We have to get organized. We have to get organized locally. We have to understand who our city council folks are, who our local state representatives are. And we have to, I'm tired of the complaining. I mean, people call me all the time and complain, and I ask them, who represents you? They have no idea. Why don't you go meet them? You're a business owner. You're creating jobs. You're paying taxes. They want to hear from you. They want to know who you are. You're a constituent. So we've got to do a better job as a community of getting involved at a local level, because all politics are local. Getting to know who those state representatives are and those city council folks are and the county council folks are, and start voting locally. This primary that just happened last week was one of the lowest turnout rates in Georgia. They talk about the blue wave, they talk about the women, the women's vote is coming, and we had more women running for office, Latinas running for office. I don't see it. I don't see any energy at all, because the numbers were abysmal. Lowest turnout, lowest primary that we've had in years. So I don't see energy out there. And what I hear is a lot of complaining and fear, but people aren't willing to do the work. And that's a shame.
Thank you so much. So do you see any opportunities for, I really don't see much of mixing of Hispanic community with, say, suppose the Asian or the Indian communities. How do we create those opportunities? Because it's like it's isolated. Oh, it's our Indian holy event. Oh, it's our Indian this event. Oh, this is our Cinco de Mayo event. But we don't seem to be coming to yours, or maybe I'm just not representing just the Indian part, but just in general. How do we start mixing and inviting?
So we have to do more of this, and I applaud you for doing this. And in our own community, we have to reach out. I'll say this. It's very hard to label Hispanic or Latino because we tend to gravitate towards Mexican, Cuban. There's the pride, you have the Puerto Rican pride, and you have the flag in your car. And so I know, because one of the folks that works with me, she's been there 15 years, she's all Puerto Rico everywhere, you know? And it's only in diaspora that we think of ourselves as Hispanic or Latinos.
Right.
If I were sitting in Cuba, and I'm glad I'm not, I would never think of myself as being Latin American or being Latino, right? So I think the first thing is we have to unify our own community. And then I think number two is we have to do a lot more of this. And we have to go ahead and get involved. There's a lack of engagement and involvement. I think it goes back to that fear that Javier was talking about. When you're an immigrant, you're isolated sometimes. You isolate yourself out of fear, especially now there's a lot of fear, right? So the leadership has to get involved.
Sure. So the next question is for Javier and Nadia. Can you both, from your own perspective, think of a situation where you had an encounter with a person from different cultural background, and how did you resolve it? Or maybe you've never had one. Go ahead.
Well, no, Nadia, you want to go first? Well, of course, I mean, I would probably say, I don't know if, you know, to call it per se the conflict, but I think the common challenge, and we've heard about this afternoon, is fighting stereotyping, labeling, and going further than that. And there are, you know, very distinct stereotypes about Latinos, like Santiago just mentioned, and there are also some very distinct stereotypes about Mexico. You might, you know, probably some of you here in the room might be surprised if I told you that I commonly, for example, get people telling me, "Are you the consul of Mexico?" "Yeah." "You don't look Mexican." I get that often. And I love it when somebody tells me something like that, because then I can give them a hard time. So I can tell them, okay, so what does look Mexican look like? You know, I should have like a mariachi hat on. Does that mean I should have, you know, big mustaches? What does looking Mexican look like? That would probably be the equivalent if I told anybody, you don't look American. What does that mean? We are, you know, my country is a very diverse country. We have very different people. We have several cultures in the same country, which is, I know, we're not unique. We're pretty much the same in that way as many other countries. But stereotypes are very real. And getting people to go beyond stereotypes is a very strong problem. I must say, we're also guilty of that in Mexico. We have strong stereotypes in Mexico about Americans. And people have, you know, these stereotypes that they've held on to for many years about what the United States is like and what Americans are like. And of course, many of those are unfair. And those stereotypes, you know, do a lot of harm. We are two countries that are deeply connected by history, by geography, by millions of families that we share. We share millions of people in the same household who are Mexican and Americans at the same time. And we are divided many times by stereotypes. And that is, you know, probably from my point of view, the most, common conflict that we face all the time in doing our work.
So next time I refer people to you, I'll make sure I tell them not to ask you that question.
Please do not.
Go ahead, Nadia.
Well, what I'll say is when I was in grade 12, so both of my parents were born in St. Lucia, which is a small island in the Caribbean, but immigrated to Canada when they were quite small. But when I was in grade 12, my dad got a job in St. Lucia, and so we all moved there for the year. And I remember, you know, packing up and saying goodbye to my friends and the whole 9 yards. And I was very excited because I was going to be going to St. Lucia and it was going to be a new experience. And, you know, my parents were from there and I grew up learning about St. Lucia and they would always talk about their home and et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, this is going to be great. And I also felt, again, going back to this whole idea of multiculturalism, that while I was very Canadian and almost knew nothing about St. Lucia, frankly, that, St. Lucia was a little part of me as well, right? And so then, in a way, I was getting to go to my parents' birthplace and learn a little bit about my history and my background, my cultural background. And I remember those first few months in St. Lucia was so difficult for me because I got there thinking, well, I'm kind of St. Lucian. Both of my parents are from St. Lucia, and, I know a little bit about it, and I know the music, and I know a little bit of the food. I grew up eating the food. And for them, I was very much an outsider. I was Canadian. There was nothing about me that was St. Lucian. There was nothing about me that resonated with them and their culture. And, I wouldn't say that it was a conflict, but it was definitely a rub, mostly for me. And definitely looking back on it now, as my 15, 16-year-old self, or however old you are in grade 12, I didn't appreciate it for being this. But looking back on it now was definitely a lesson in this idea of intersectionality and who am I and what are the pieces of a puzzle that make me me.
Very nice, thank you. So the next question is for Firdaus and Dr. Uma. So as women, we are told to do this, don't do this. And again, there's several limitations sometimes. But also there's something called, as a leader, what can you do individually to make a change of action? Or how can you do a system change? So either you make a difference individually by educating, but also you can make system policy changes from the places where you work to respect some of the things that you believe in, not yourself, but for the broader good. Do you see yourself making such a difference from where you are, from where you sit or where you stand, or is it hard?
For me is you have to be very involved. And the second thing is I believe in education. Educating, especially as a woman, and educating women, especially the immigrant, and knowing they have to educate what is their right. When you are arrived in this country, you have a right. The right you didn't have it in your country, you have a right here. So most of things that we are facing as a domestic violence advocate, women, they don't know their rights. So that is part of education. And you cannot change only yourself because it means you are very selfish. As a woman, and you have to reach out to other women. And in working together, changing, you have to be involved. As I don't know his name, said you have to know who is your commissioner. You have to be involved. You have to go to the meetings, council meetings, board of education meetings. If you're sitting home and just thinking change is not going to happen. So everyone needs to be involved. You have to vote. You have to organize. If something you don't like it, you have to address it. And I don't like something, and if I'm sitting home, it's not going to change. And I have to find another outlets. I have to find another organizations that will address that issue. I can be involved, be a volunteer, or donate to the cause. So this kind of things are what makes a difference. So as a woman here, most of you are here, I encourage you, highly encourage you to be involved. You have to empower yourself, and by organizing, by being involved.
Thank you. Dr. Uma, so the same question goes to you from where you're sitting. What sort of a difference are you making, big or small, individually or system change?
Well, that means I'm allowed to brag.
You're allowed.
No. But that's, I think it starts with the family.
Right.
With your own individual contribution as a family, as husband, as wife, as children. if your children see you participate in intercultural events, in what you say, a mainstream of culture, not only attending Indian things, Indian occasions, Indian festivals, but citywide occasions, citywide festivals, citywide cultural events, food events, whichever way. But if you do not, if you are isolated, and I like the point of the last person, that we have a tendency, each one of us, to isolate ourselves into ghettos, cultural ghettos. And of course, we all love to speak our language and gather 3 or 4 Hispanics or Indians and blah, 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 and you start speaking in your own provincial language also, okay? Very normal, very understandable. But get out also of these so-called narrow circles. Participate in the beginning, it will be very awkward, but as you keep doing that, and you attend your children's school events, take leadership, be a part of the committee, school educational committee, because most Indians who come here, at least at the time that we came, they're highly educated. So education is your ticket to the culture. But that education should not be used to isolate yourself and feel superior educationally to others, but mix with others, try to celebrate the things. In every, I think, most Indian households, we celebrate Christmas, celebrate our Hindu festivals, and also some of our neighbors. So that is to me a personal example. And if you continue doing that, I think your children learn through you, and they become a contributing individuals in this society.
Very nice, very well said. So the next question is for Jay, Lynn, and Dr. Carter. So if we all look the same, right, and if we all wore the same type of outfits, if we all spoke the same, there was no difference, would that be a world you would want to live in? Why or why not?
Absolutely not. That means I'm going to have to miss one of my favorite Mexican food, enchiladas. And I love Korean kimchi. So I just want to kind of piggyback on what Santiago said about the election. We have such a low turnout, absolutely. And to me, that was also disappointing. Every one of the voters that participated voted for the other 10. So, and that is the situation that I think, as a community, we do want to address. And also going back to the cultural, what bring different cultures together? Besides art, I think food is absolutely that will bring people together, and sports as well. Talk about the Latino Prize. I think in World Cup soccer night, that is the night that you don't want to get in between, two teams. And I just want to let everybody know that in Johns Creek, we are one of the most diverse small city in the United States. 25+% of our citizens who reside in the city are non-Caucasians. So 18 months ago, that myself and council member Bob Gray at the time were tasked by the mayor and council to start coming up with ways to increase, to bring everybody together. So about a year ago, we decided to have an international festival, and which took place about a month ago. And to our surprise, in a good way, originally all the staff and volunteers, we anticipated 12 to 13,000 attendees. But to our surprise, we had over 22,000. So people are embracing the programs like that. And I think we just have to do more and more of those. I think people having stereotyping others because of lack of understanding. And if we create opportunities for assimilations and to bring communities together across the board from different cultural groups, people group, I think this world is going to be a beautiful world.
Very nice. Thank you. Dr. Carter?
It's interesting that when I was in grad school at Columbia, I was very much involved. This was in the late 60s, early 70s, when black consciousness was the big thing. But I was curious. I moved to San Francisco. I did my internship at the University of California there. And one of the things that really interested me was, if the body is essentially universal, a surgeon can go anywhere in the world, he'll find lungs, heart, so forth and so on. The body is essentially universal. And I was saying, is the mind universal? Now, what they taught me then at Columbia was, Freud, Skinner, and all that stuff, okay? But that wasn't enough. That didn't explain it. There is a universal mind, all right? And the universal mind has to have separation. It would never allow you to think that you're just the same as anybody else. That's just the way the mind is structured. And you have to be aware of that, because no matter how much you may try to work and improve, the conditions out there, you can't until you get to the source. And the source is always the mind. And the mind thinks. Okay, one of my greatest teachers is Ramana Maharishi from southern India, okay, who essentially asked the question, who am I, all right? And he was realizing that everything comes back to I, to me. Now, who is this me that thinks that he can do something? Well, this me is always, I'm from Alabama originally, okay, from a little small town. At least at that time, it was Huntsville. It was a small town then. And I was considered country, okay? And then when I came here to Morehouse, they were, hey, country boy, okay? You get a bunch of, at one time I was a Baptist. Okay, I'm not religious anymore, not formally. But anyway, Baptist, the saying about Baptist is Baptist multiplied by dividing. Okay, First Baptist, Second Baptist, and so forth, missionary. But the thing is, that's the result of the mind. The mind has to find something that you're different than me. And the mind will now allow us to look at, how are we the same? Okay, that's the scariest thing. That's even scarier than what we call death. So unless you know that as the basis of how you, me, or, well, we know how Donald Trump thinks, but, how anybody thinks, that they will see differences, and they will make judgments about these differences. And they will say one is better than the other. If I'm a Sunni, I'm better than a Shia. Or if I'm Baptist, I'm better than, the Catholics. Or whatever. I mean, fill in the blank. That comes out of the mind. And until they start teaching that at Columbia, Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, I don't care, Stanford, wherever, we are still caught in the mind. And that's what Ramana knew. And that's what he was trying to teach, okay? And until we get there, we'll be caught in our minds.
Thank you. So the next question, I know Councilman Jay Lin has to leave by 5:45, so we're okay with that, and I'll definitely come to you for final thoughts before you leave. But before that, Joe and Milena, the question is for you. So we call it African American, Asian American, Japanese American, Indian American, Pakistani American, every American, every American. So what are the systems that allow to oppress people, and does race matter anymore in USA? But before you answer that, I had a Nigerian intern with me, and I asked her, this was like a few years ago, I asked her, do you ever get discriminated? She said, yeah. I said, by whom? She said, by my fellow African Americans. So how do we work on that implicit racial bias as well?
Well, let me add on to what Dr. Carter was talking about. My teacher in this area is actually an Israeli by the name of Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for economics because they don't happen to have one for psychology. But he wrote a book that was a popular book several years ago called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he makes the point, by oversimplifying, the fact that the human animal is a social animal, but we make immediate decisions about somebody we confront, and we're not even aware of it. What do they look like? Where did I see them? How are they acting? We take 80% of our information visually. We don't take very much this way. Although I teach in a university, I don't think very much learning goes on in evenly spaced rows in 50-minute increments. I think what happens is that people get engaged in something and then they figure out what they have to know to solve the problem. But the problem you have is us, the Walt Kelly Pogo cartoon, we've met the enemy and it is us. And so you have to start with the understanding that every one of us comes wired with a set of perceptual biases. And we tend to agree with people we like, even if we know they're not telling us the truth. And we tend to disagree with people we don't like, even if we know they are telling us the truth. We tend to like the things that reinforce what we already believe. Now, this is aggravated at the current time by the echo chamber effect of 50,000 media sources, so you can just listen to people that already agree with what you already believe. And we live in an age of true believers, which means anything I believe must be true. So the combination of these things makes it very hard to say there's going to be a fix, because it starts with understanding you can't get an inoculation. You can't take a shot to get over being human and being subject to this process. But celebrating the cultures from which people come is a way of accepting things that are important to others. But it only happens when you have enough self-confidence in yourself that you're not feeling threatened, that you're not feeling insecure about who am I, to the extent that anybody that isn't exactly what you think you are or want to be becomes a threat. And so, to answer your question, I think the way we deal with this is a much better job making people aware of the differences, and that's okay. One of the best ways to do it is bilingual education. It is not only important for brain development, which is before age 8, the ability to learn a second language becomes really important, and it does affect the way the brain forms synapses. And it then allows you to learn other languages more easily. If they actually spoke a different language in Alabama, we'd all be speaking 2 languages here. But the fact of the matter is, you look at the cultures that are around, and India is a great example of all the languages that are present there. Geographic differences will matter. But if you are familiar with the fact that there's more than one way to call things, more than one way to think about things, there may not be just one answer to a problem, then you're in a position to accept the notion that differences are not as threatening. And that's the part that we have to get over. But I don't think there's a fix. You can't be immunized against the fact that you're human and you come with these biases. You just have to be able to recognize you're part of the problem.
Sure. So before we go to Milena's, the same question, how many of you all know what poverty of friendships mean? Do you know how you recognize if you belong into that category? Is you pick up your phone and see the last 10 numbers that you've either called or they've called you. And if they don't seem or look anywhere like you or speak like you, that means you are in that category of poverty of friendship, because you are belonging within to someone who looks or talks like you. So those are the only friends you have, right? So I bet Shankar is saying there was his wife who called him the last 10 times. So Milena, tell me, what are the systems that oppress others, that allow for oppressing others?
Well, I think certainly the media does, and that's why I keep on trying to teach my children. You have to listen and observe, and it's okay to read about the news and whatever you want to get the information about, but always be critical. Don't believe everything just blindly. You just have your own brains, and it's time to use it, and don't have your biases regarding any aspects. And I keep on telling that always, be always critical. And I think also I think maybe I should say something about my ground and my family, because this is something really difficult. I am originally from South America, Venezuela. My husband is from India. My boy was born in Japan, and my daughter was born in India. And we were living in Germany from the time he was 3 till last year. And once at home, it came the question, what am I? Because you are not calling me German. We were talking about different issues in Germany, and he asked, why I'm not a German? Just easy. Are you asking me about your cultural background, whatever language you speak, whatever we teach you, or are you talking to me about the passport you are holding? It's a very difficult question for me to answer.
Very nice. I hope you continue to ponder on those along with your kids. So, Jalen, before you leave, give us your final thoughts. We do have closing comments from a couple of our panelists, but give us your closing thoughts on the panel today and how we should continue these dialogues.
Okay, well, first of all, just thank you very much, Dr. Nazira, to put this together, and I appreciate all the panelists. Let's give her a hand. This is one of the activities and events that we can bring communities together. I think many of us have identified the problem or a challenge. Now is the time for us to do what we can where we are with what we have. And everybody goes to work, in school, at their workplace. We leverage our influence. We leverage our influence in ways that give a little education every day for the people that we have influence over. So I think the task and challenge is huge, and it's not going to be solution is not going to come overnight. So I think it does take everyone to give a little every day and identify opportunities to be part of the solution. So again, thank you very much for having me. And I apologize that I do have a 6 o'clock commitment in Johns Creek, so I have to leave early. But thank you again very much, and also the great panelists.
Thank you for being here, Jay. Thank you so much. So let's start with Santiago for a quick 30 minutes final comments before we have our closing comments from our other speakers. Santiago, what's your 30-second closing thoughts?
Get involved, get engaged. Don't complain and sit at home and just watch everything happen. We need leadership, and everybody can be a leader. Leadership is for everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, there are many cultures and many differences, and to learn about other cultures and to understand, the most important is seeing and believing. So we have talked about the Japan Fest, but I have 3 other suggestions that might be interesting for yourself or for younger generations. The first one is that we have an Japanese national broadcasting English programs broadcast aired 24 hours on 1155 1155 on Comcast. So if you are interested, please have a look. And secondly, we are going to have from this August a new charter school in Peachtree Corners. Its name is International Charter Academy of Georgia, and it's giving free dual immersion education from K to 5 in English and in Japanese, and they also teach Chinese as third language. So if you are interested to place your children maybe from 20 19. That might be interesting. And the third thing is that we have a Japanese governmental program named the JET program. JET stands for Japan Exchange and Teaching, and it allows to young people who graduated from colleges to go to Japan for 1, 2, or 3 years to teach English in Japanese schools, and all the expenses are borne by the Japanese government. So if you have young people around you who will be in the last year of college, please advise them to have a look on the website of my consulate. And the deadline for application is in early November. Thank you.
Konnichiwa, thank you. Joe?
I'm honored to be included in this group. I wanted to suggest, as I have repeatedly indicated, that I think children are the source of our effort to try to move this thing forward. And so I would encourage the arts in schools. I think the Johns Creek schools have been doing this. The Gwinnett system has done a terrific job, but really trying to find ways in which they can both learn of their own cultures and the historic cultures they may come from, but also in sharing in efforts to learn others by doing things that would be in groups. Because I think in the process, you build a greater appreciation for who they are and who they can respect that's different than they are.
Thank you. Firdaus?
Get involved, know your rights, respect other cultures and values, and empower yourself by educating yourself, and look into different events. Attend all the events. There's a lot of events going on in Atlanta. Most of them are free events. And get to know each other and get to know your neighbors. Get to know other people. Don't just be in your own community or in your own native people. Just get outside of that and try to know, if you're Indian, try to have friends from Korea or Arabs or African Americans. So that's the way you learn other cultures and other values.
Thank you.
Well, I guess if I would have sort of one key takeaway, I would sort of parrot my prime minister, who says that diversity is a given, but inclusiveness is a choice. And so I think that the conversation that we had today really sort of reflects that, you know, we are all different, we all come from different backgrounds, and that's a fact. Whether we choose to be inclusive and to accept one another for our differences and to learn about our differences is really a choice. And I would just finally say that Joe's point about starting from the space where you understand that everybody has bias and that everybody is able to overcome that bias, petit à petit, as we would say in French, is the starting point to sort of overcoming bias and being inclusive and developing an inclusive society.
Thank you. I thought you wouldn't bring up your prime minister's, but people here bet they want to know if you have direct connection with him. Right? Go ahead, Javier.
Thank you. I've lived long enough in the United States to see different places in which they are facing different realities and different diversity. The Southeast is a part of this country that is facing a very diverse and a very diverse community, a large influx of people from all over the world. But it's a more recent phenomenon. That's the case in other parts of the United States. And when that happens, diversity creates challenges. And so there are strong challenges in some communities here in the Southeast that are still, struggling to adapt to the new reality of diversity. Resisting diversity, I always say, is a little bit like saying, I don't like winter. You might not like winter, but it's going to happen anyway. And you better be ready for it. Maybe I'm not so happy with summer. Well, same thing. So it's, a community, an authority, local governments is not a choice for them. Paraphrasing your prime minister, it is not a choice. It is better to think of it in terms of some cities, some authorities have grasped and have taken the advantage of diversity as an opportunity. And those are the communities that are thriving. There are some that are trying to resist it. Again, winter is coming anyway. And they will have to adapt to it. Those who adapt faster, those who reach out faster and better are the ones that are going to be better positioned in the future. And then the other thing to our immigrant community, our immigrant communities, I think, is important to underline the message that you also need to reach out outside of your community. It's not good enough to have Cinco de Mayo, which, by the way, is not even a holiday in Mexico. It's not, and Cinco de Mayo and the Asian festival or any other festival where our community, have these festivals, but they stay inside their own bubbles. I think it's a lot better, the example that Jay was talking about, for example, this festival that took place here in Johns Creek, an international festival, where all the communities, where all the cultures are at the same place at the same time. And people from the Latino-Mexican community can, learn about people who are different from them, and learn about other cultures, other food, other music. That is the real, the real sort of thing that I think makes a step forward.
Thank you so much.
Well, I think the world for sure is going to change because nowadays this cultural issue is not only in U.S. but worldwide. And I think nowadays you will find much more families, intercultural families, where both parents are coming from very different cultures and the kids are growing in a totally different third one. And I think I hope so, they won't be asking anymore who I am in the sense where I'm coming from or with specific culture, but the person that you are.
Very nice. Thank you so much for that.
The answer is very simple, and it's nothing new. Know thyself. And as Joe was saying earlier, know that fear is always going to come up because the mind is based on fear. So just know that and keep, going beyond the fear. Fear is a limitation, but nothing can limit me. And unless I face the fear, and this is what you're doing, you're asking people, break down these walls, okay? Whatever you've been taught, to protect yourself, know that will limit you. And you shouldn't let anybody limit you. So get to know the other person, and once you get to know the other person, you'll find out the other person is you. That's what all the sages have taught, all the wise ones. And to know wisdom, you have to find that out. I have to find that out.
Thank you. Dr. Umar? Thank you.
That's such excellent, excellent points from each speaker. And some I agree with, some I don't agree with. But one thing, that even if, as you said, that mind sees the difference, and it is the dharma, we say in India, dharma of our mind, to see this person is this way, that person is this way. But then when you think deeper, get to know the person more, then you realize how we are all so much not only close, but similar. And I think humanity is the most important thing. And as Mahatma Gandhi used to say, focus on the culture of the heart, which every community has, which all people have. And when we come together focusing on the culture of the heart, you cannot but help to be good and kind and compassionate and understanding. And I'll wind up with one beautiful quote that I like very much of Mahatma Gandhi. He says, I do not want my house to be walled in on all sides. I do not want my house to be walled in on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the cultures of all the lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible. But I refuse to be blown off my feet by any culture. So keep your own and grow, learn, and also I think it applies to me more than anyone, that not only you take interest and go to different cultural events, learn about other religions, cultures, and also, more importantly, learn to accept the differences. We are not going to be 100% alike or thinking alike in every matter. But once we know and where are the differences, and let not differences come in our way of progressing, because that is where, all these fights and all these international and political, prejudices and all this. So once we just, and for that I'm thinking of Indian model of joint family. In the ideal Indian joint family, we know there are all kinds of relatives and all kinds of people, and some are jerks, and some are totally, not capable. I'm sorry to say that. But you learn to accept, you learn to overcome the differences, and to speak bluntly, to put up with some, and still not let that hinder your
Progress.
togetherness.
Yes.
So when you start accepting that, overcome that, and still learn to live peacefully and joyfully, that will be what we call in India Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means the whole world is my family.
Very nice, very nicely said. Before we go for break, I would like to invite Kim Scholar for a 2-minute quick closing comments, and then Sunmi Kim, and I'm also going to give Geeta Mehrotra a couple of minutes right after that, but let's do it fast because we started a bit late, so I'm going to end it in the next 5 to 7 minutes. Can you hold on to, yeah. Thank you, Kim. And you saw Kim's profile. She's been on our panel before.
Yes, thank you, Nazira. Well, it's been wonderful hearing all of these great thoughts and ideals about different cultures and identity. And my father came to the United States in 1957 from the Philippines. So for the Filipinos in the room, mabuhay. People come to this country for all kinds of different reasons, for opportunity, for education, for freedom, for family. And all of that we call the American dream. And, it has to do with what several panelists said, wanting a better life for yourself, wanting a better life for your children. Now, implicit for a lot of people in achieving the American dream is this element of prosperity. There are people who think that who come to the United States is this opportunity to make a lot of money or to have a stable financial life. And different cultures think about money in different ways, and different cultures think about financial responsibility in different ways. But no matter what culture we come from or what those perspectives may be, in the United States, we all need to understand about retirement. And we need to understand about the rising costs of healthcare. And we need to understand about what it costs to send our child to college today. And all of the college students who graduate today with an enormous amount of debt, regardless of what their culture is or where they come from. We need to have a basic understanding of taxes and what's going to happen with taxes and interest rates and the stock market in the future. And so no matter what your culture is, what your perspective on money, what your perspective on financial responsibility is, I encourage everyone to get a basic financial education. Now, the financial services industry for a long time has not done a very good job of reaching out to different cultures. And it's taken leaders in the community to step up and help sort of lead the way. Dr. Neal with Quantum Bank, other community leaders who have really wanted to reach out in that area of finances for the community at large. But financial services is getting better. We are providing information in many more languages now. And we are taking into account what different cultures feel about investing in different things. And so I would say this is one of the best times ever to come from a cultural perspective, but to get that financial information and understand about, from the financial side and the prosperity side, what that means to achieve the American dream.
Thank you so much. Sumi, do you want to go ahead? Thank you so much. Sumi is the VP for, I'm going to allow you to say about yourself, but you are the expert in inclusion and diversity. That's how I see you as.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Nazira. Hi, everyone. I'm Soon-Mi Kim. I am Executive Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion for my organization called Porter Novelli. I first want to commend you, Nazira, for having this very special conversation, which does not happen enough, maybe at all. I want to thank each and every one of the panelists here today for each of the things that you shared, because I think we could all identify with something that you shared at the very beginning. It's interesting. We talked a lot about identity. In my case, I'm Korean, I'm American. And you'll notice I didn't put a hyphen there. And that's very intentional. And interestingly, I'm sure, like when you see me, there's probably a certain stereotype that comes to mind. And as I was looking at this illustrious panel here, I was curious to think like what this group might think that I most related to. Could be the wonderful women that are on the stage. It could be maybe the Asian and East Asian representation. But actually, as I was listening to the backgrounds of the individuals here, it was actually Dr. Carter, your background that actually I related to most. My father was a professor at different historically black colleges and universities in the South. At Knoxville College, that was his first place, yes. We have a Tennessee connection. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we have an Alabama connection. My sister was born in Montgomery, Alabama. So
Wow.
there were certain elements like, oh my gosh, this is interesting about everyone here. Like I could connect with at least 3 different points that was related to you. And I think that's probably the beauty of conversations like this, when we can look across what might be like the more kind of obvious things that we think are connections to other connections. Because I think the challenge here, and so many of you addressed this today, is that we tend to self-segregate. Whether it's the friendships that we have, the neighborhoods that we live in, the schools where our children go, or the places of worship that we attend, that there's so many things that we do, perhaps unwittingly, to kind of close ourselves off. So this conversation here today is actually a very radical act to really come together and to listen to others' experiences and so forth. So in my role as a diversity and inclusion leader at my company, my job is really to create an environment where we have diversity, where we're choosing inclusion, really because that's what it requires to have a successful organization. And what drives me in my capacity is really one word, and that word is reconciliation. And that word is powerful because it's a recognition that we should be connected to each other, that we should be in relationship with one another. And so in closing, I just want to share a few things that I think are important in that road to reconciliation. And number one, that's our history. We don't know our history. That is so apparent when we look at what is going on in the political world. And it's not just the good parts of our history. There's a lot of bad parts of our history. And I think we really need to know that and to consider that, because that's what helps us be in relationship with others. And if you faced oppression and so forth, then you can use that to really empathize with others. I had the benefit of playing hooky one day from work. I was in Washington, D.C., and I went to the National African American Museum. I somehow got in because it's really hard to get in there. And what I realized as someone, even though I was a political science major, I enjoy history. What I learned from being there is I don't know jack about American history. And if that's the case for me, that may be the case for others. I would say the second thing that is a second step that's really important in the road to reconciliation is this sense of okay, now that we know more, we've got to do better. And how can we atone for that and take responsibility for the acts that we've committed against, again, wittingly or unwittingly, so that we can be in relationship with one another, so that we can seek forgiveness as well as just that connection again. And the third thing that I would just add is this. When I see some of the ugliness that exists in whenever I turn on the news or just what's going on in our community, I often think, wow, if that individual just knew one person or one family that was different from them, then knowing how good that person is, I am so sure that they would have greater empathy for others. And so what I would suggest is for each of us here today that let's be that family for others, or let's find that family for ourselves, so that we can truly be in reconciliation with one another. So I thank you again.
Thank you. So I also have Geeta finally, because even though she has a broken arm, she's still here wanted to speak to you all quickly. Yes, you can use the mic there. About love and culture. And Geeta, you are probably between the chai and us, but go ahead.
I'll just take 2 minutes. I really appreciate you doing this program because it's efforts like this. She deserves another big round of applause. And I'm here on behalf of Sadhu Vaswani Center Atlanta. Suraj, Komal, and Dr. Heyman is also here. We are celebrating what you would call a legend of love. 100 years of offering one's life to humanity, not to one culture, not to one country, but to humanity and creation. Dada J.P. Vaswani, who will be 100 years old on August 2nd. And we are celebrating his birthday on July 15th at the Carter Center. The reason we chose Carter Center is because we wanted to align ourselves with the values of Dada and the Carter, President Carter himself, and also because Dada has always taught us that humanity is one family. We wanted every culture and every person to come and celebrate his love. And I noticed you all mentioned art, sports that will connect us with other cultures, but Dada teaches us love. So it'll be love, live love. Only when we will love our own culture, then we will respect the other person's culture. And in Dada's teaching, everywhere he's gone around the world, he quotes from Quran, he quotes from Bible, he quotes from Zoroastrian, he quotes from German authors from different categories of life. He doesn't exclude anybody. And I would invite all of you to be part of this sacred celebration. He's 100 years old and he still works full time and he still tries to travel. And I would like all of you all to join hands with us to give this person the birthday celebration that he well deserves.
Thank you.
And I would thank you. And what an opportunity for me to invite the whole world on this platform, and you are part of it also.
Thank you so
Thank you so much. I hope I didn't take up much time from the child. Thank you.
So I heard three main things: love, acceptance, inclusion, diversity. So thank you so much for being here. Can we have all the kids up here, whoever are here, the children up here, so they can hand the gift to the panelists? Come on, Santiago's daughter, Rita, Maggie, all the other kids, whoever's here. If anyone had called about kids, I would have gone with them too. So come on. So let's hand the gifts as a thank you note. Neelam, can you come help me? Yeah, just one by one, okay? So he can take the pictures, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's go for a break. We're going to start with our first set of music. And Sneha Talika is the coordinator. So Sneha, thank you for pulling this together within like 5 days of discussion. And we wanted to provide something unique. So all the young artists came forward to do this. So we're going to have inspirational music that's going to be played out from the discussions that we had. So sort of the discussion that we had is going to be implemented through music. So go ahead. Thank you so much for being here. And the profiles are running behind on the screens, the artist's profile.
So we're just going to be the surprise people, since it's a unity. So we're going to sing a unity song. It originated in Georgia. Not many people know about it, this song, but it got converted into multiple languages in India. This is one of the famous songs in India, so we're going to sing it in Hindi. Just bear with us. No. Are you going to go first with that one line? Yeah. Yeah. In here.
होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। हो मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन।
होगी शांति चारों ओर,
होगी शांति चारों ओर, होगी शांति चारों ओर एक दिन। हो मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हो शांति चारों ओर एक दिन।
We're just gonna wing it. I'm sorry. हम चलेंगे साथ साथ, हम चलेंगे साथ साथ, डाले हाथों में हाथ, हम चलेंगे साथ साथ एक दिन।
हो मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हम चलेंगे साथ साथ एक दिन।
नहीं डर किसी का आज, नहीं डर किसी का, नहीं डर किसी का आज ये दिन। ओ मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, नहीं डर किसी का आज ये दिन। हम
होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। हो मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। Thank you.
You know, there were some similarities. I don't know how many of you have understood or followed. The purpose of this is we don't need a language. We don't need. That's why there was no introduction given to this program. So when you see the mridangam, which was the second item that was played, and the third item that was played by violin, exactly same songs, same tunes, but different speeds, but it doesn't make any difference to us. And the last song, so she played on the piano and as well as the violin, which was, she adopted a different tone or different notes, but the same song, We Shall Overcome. And the same song was sung by our two beautiful singers, Hum Honge Kamyab. So the conclusion of this is there are some disparities, there are some differences of opinions, world has boundaries, but music connects everyone. This is one world. and we will overcome all the diversities, and we will be one. Thank you all.
So thank you so much. Sneha put this all for us within the 5 days that we discussed. And thank you so much, artists. We have the certificates for you. But don't forget to grab some more tea and refreshments. And the next program is on June 24th, which is on health or diet. So please feel free to attend and let others know. And acceptance, love, inclusion, diversity, let's make it happen. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all.